It's tax day today, and the Patriotic Millionaires are saying, hey, raise our taxes. Seriously, check it out. Morris Pearl is with us. And leave your comments, ding the bell, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It is tax day. Truckers are getting seriously PO'd. The big pharma companies saved $7 billion last year from Trump's tax law, the GOP tax scam. And Pfizer has announced that they're raising prices on 41 of their prescription drugs. Johnson & Johnson raised prices on 24 prescription drugs. Merck said it's raising prices on 5 of its prescription drugs. Trump said, I actually called the heads of Pfizer, Novartis, and others. I said, you can't do that. You can't raise your prices. And you know what they did? They brought them down. They didn't raise them. No, sorry, they lied to you, or you lied to us. So we've got that, and we've got this weird notion that shareholders should be the only ones who get any benefit from a corporation. Prior to the 1970s, it was understood that corporations had multiple stakeholders, basically. You had the community in which the corporation existed. You had the employees. It used to be bad news when corporations laid off people. It used to be considered a bad sign. Their stock would go down. Now it goes up. You had the employees. You had the customers. You had the institution of the corporation itself. You had the people who work within the corporation. And, of course, you had the shareholders. These were all the stakeholders in a corporation. And then in the late 70s, Milton Friedman wrote this piece saying, oh, no, the shareholders actually own the company, so everything should be about them. And, in 93, actually, this kind of essentially became part of our tax law. Very strange stuff. We've reached this point where it's all about making shareholders richer. On the line with us is Morris Pearl. He's the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires. He's a former managing director of BlackRock, Inc. PatrioticMillionaires.org is the website. Morris's Twitter handle is Morris_Pearl, just like mine is Thom_Hartmann. Morris, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, great to be in your show, Tom.
Thank you. So, first of all, what is the state of taxation in the United States for people at your level of wealth and or income versus the average working person in America?
Well, basically, people like me, investors who don't actually work but earn income from investments, pay much lower taxes than people who actually work for a living. And I honestly have no idea why.
You know, one of the memes that I keep seeing on television are TV commentators asking people, are you a capitalist? And, somebody asked me if I'm a capitalist. Outside of a little bit of retirement income that I would hope is going to earn money. It actually lost money last year. But outside of that, no, I don't make my living from capital. I make my living working. I write books. I do a radio show. I have an income stream. And I have my entire life. I've started and sold off 5 different businesses. But I never did that based on capital. It's always been on elbow grease. How is it that the term capitalist has come to mean somebody who believes in free enterprise as opposed to somebody who lives off their capital?
Well, I think all of us believe in free enterprise. You've been involved in free enterprise, too.
Yes, absolutely.
And our businesses are capitalist. Capitalist basically means that people privately own businesses instead of the government owning all businesses. So I think most Americans subscribe to capitalism. In fact, the whole world does now, basically. There aren't really any societies that don't. So I think that capitalists have to get away from this weird idea you were just talking about, that only the owners count, because that's really not even in their own long-term best interests. That started, when Carl Icahn realized the management of TWA was kind of being too greedy, and then he could run the company a little bit better by selling off all the pieces of it for more than it cost him to buy it. But that doesn't work for most companies. You can't have companies and just sell them to try to make money for the shareholders and close down capitalism, because that is not even the long-term best interest of the capitalists. If you actually want to run a business, you want to keep it going for the future, you need owners, you need employees, you need customers, you need people who can buy stuff. You don't want a society of just a few rich people and lots of poor people. That doesn't work for any of us.
So how do we pull back from these fairly radical changes that were made in policy in the 80s and Reagan, deciding essentially he was no longer going to enforce the antitrust laws and things, and then the rise of the mergers and acquisition business in the 80s, and then of course this being written into tax law in 1993.
I think we as a society have to get people to do two things. One is to decide that we don't want the rich to get richer and everyone else to get poorer. And the other is to look at both that and everything else in a longer-term perspective. It's not all about how much money you'll make in the next 3 months. People say, oh, what about Kansas? So the people in Kansas aren't stupid. They're voting for what they think is in their long-term best interests, not for who will make more money in the next 3 months. And so do I. I don't vote based on which candidate will have a policy to make me richer this year. And neither do most people. I think we have to make corporate America understand that, too, that it's not just about this quarter. It's about the long term.
Isn't that structural, though? Isn't that a matter of changing the incentives? Elizabeth Warren has this Affordable Capitalism Act, and she's suggesting that 40% of the board of directors of a company should be made up of workers, essentially. In Germany, every corporation that has more than 1,000 employees, they're required by the German Constitution that their board of directors be made up at 50% workers from that company. That's one proposal. There's acknowledging, that the community is one of the stakeholders in a corporation, and the corporation has to consider its impact on a community when it makes corporate decisions. The workers are, all these different stakeholders. Isn't this really a matter of changing the incentive structure?
I think we need to, but I also think we need rules and regulations.
Well, that's how you do it, right?
You can't expect people to do it voluntarily, because if one company decides, oh, I'm going to think long term, and all the rest don't, well, somebody can go and buy that company, because over the very short term, over a few months, that's not going to make them more money. Right. It has to be something like the same reason we need rules that you can't, walk on the grass. If one person walks on the grass, well, that's fine. But if we all do, it'll be destroyed. So we have to have some rules that say, well, none of us will walk on the grass between the paths, and we'll all have a nice garden.
So what are the rules that you would propose to reclaim functional capitalism?
I think we need some kind of rules that are not to avoid the short-termism, to avoid the idea that you can buy a corporation, and that if you realize that the things that it owns, the airplanes or the factories or whatever, are worth a tiny bit more than the price of it on one day, you can just buy it and sell all those things and make back your money. That's not what we should be encouraging, but somehow we are. And that's the problem with American society, is that we're very short-term, and we have a tax code that makes the rich people have lower tax rates than working people, and so encourages that kind of behavior.
How do you respond to people who would say that by arguing in favor of raising taxes on rich people, or at least equalizing their taxes with the taxes of working people, that you're arguing that it's a zero-sum game, that there's no more extra money that can be made, that somebody getting richer means somebody else is getting poorer?
It's not a zero-sum game, because if we all do better, we'll all do better. Talk to the guy who, runs your local bar. He's a lot more concerned about how much beer money all the customers have on Friday night than about how much salary the one guy pouring the beer makes.
Right.
So if everybody gets higher wages, well, then he'll do better too. Look, the people in Seattle where they raised the minimum wage, they didn't have trouble because they were paying their workers too much. They had trouble leasing more space to expand their restaurants and bars because so many more people want to eat out. They're suddenly making more money. So I think it's far more than a zero-sum game. It's a huge sum game. If we can get more money in the hands of working people who actually spend it, as opposed to investors who just look at our computer screens and see our portfolios get more valuable, that's what's going to help the businesses expand.